My name is Dave Matthews. Welcome to the Get Mental podcast with Hearts and Minds. I have the privilege and honor of introducing John Ross to the podcast. John, what's up?
Hey, what's happening, Dave? Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So John is a 15 seasons in the NBA, front office staff, coaching staff, etc., as well as a lot of humanitarian aid work that we were talking about before we entered into the podcast surrounding Ukraine and Zimbabwe, which I would love to get into, obviously, as well. And currently he is the CEO of the Get in the Game 101, helping athletes work in the NBA and getting through that. So, John, I guess we'll start off with that question. What is Get in the Game 101?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I worked 15 seasons in the NBA. One of the things I did was help hire interns. So I would, application after application, and so many people want to work in a front office or coaching staff. And I started going, we get 1,000 applications, and I started to see, a lot of patterns of here's who gets interviews, here's who gets hired. And so, I wrote an article like 3 ways to get an NBA internship and kind of went viral on LinkedIn. Wrote another one, 3 ways to keep an NBA internship. And then I decided, then I turned it into like its own little blog, basically. And then, after my time in the NBA was done, I decided to like host an online course, and things kind of blew up from there. And so, I teach 4 courses throughout the year, kind of based on whatever season the NBA in. So next one is the NBA draft course and then summer league. And we do a trade deadline and and so basically it's revolved around there. I bring in a bunch of people from the NBA, GMs, scouts, coaches, and, we dive into it with the students. It's mainly those in college, out of college, who want to work in the NBA. And it's kind of like, what did I want to know when I was trying to break in of like how to do this? Like I first thing I did was Googled NBA jobs. I had no clue what to do. And, now I know, what students can do to give themselves opportunity. So I just try to help with that process.
That's awesome, man. And honestly, it's one of those things where obviously this is kind of an industry of like who you know, right? But I'm understanding that there's probably skills and tips too along the way, not just about who you know. So I guess dive into that. Like when it comes to one of your courses, what are some of the things that like a potential learner may experience?
Yeah, I mean, first off, like you just mentioned, skills. That's my number one thing people have to have is a lot of people, even when I worked in the NBA, people would apply telling me it was their dream to work in the NBA. It's everyone's dream. That doesn't count. It's like, what's your skill? And so that's kind of the first thing is you got to have a skill. And so even with our classes, that's one of the things we try to do is partner with different companies, Cleaning the Glass with analytics, Cerebro, we got Pro Insight with scouting. So we work with these other groups who come in and teach our students skills. And then the second thing is experience. And so you got to have a skill, and then you got to have experience. And then, like you said, your network. That's one of the biggest things of our courses, I'd say, is one, you're going to meet 10 to 15 people who worked in the NBA or who are currently working in the NBA. But then you're also going to meet, 20 to 30 other students who are on the same path as you. And that's one of the things we always say is like, sometimes those are more important relationships than us. It's your peers, because you guys are going to kind of rise up together. When I look at like, when I was a video coordinator in the NBA, like, Will Hardy, the coach of Utah, we were video guys together. Amin El Hassan, went on to ESPN, like we were video coordinators together. So it's a lot of those guys who, you all rise up together.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And one of the things you said that I guess echoes to me personally is everybody wants to get into the NBA, right? It's kind of like athletes where it's, everybody wants to, I don't know, go to USC or the Alabamas, or it depends on, the sport that you play. It's like, oh, we have this goal to go here. And it's not just that that's not going to be the differentiating factor. I guess that's going to set you apart from other individuals that are trying to like break into the industry. So you also need the skills. I guess in your opinion, what are some of the mindsets or the frames of the students that kind of have these beliefs that are maybe just like the wrong beliefs about the industry, and how are you correcting those? So I guess like myths that individuals have, or like you're kind of busting some of these myths. Is it like that the skills required? Is it, again, the people that what are some of the mindsets that like individuals come in with, and how do they leave that program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like one, it's like all those things combined. I guess the thing I always preach to my students or to anyone who wants to work in the NBA is to embrace and enjoy the journey. You got to enjoy the process, because if you don't enjoy the process, it's not worth it, because the odds of actually getting a job, internship in the NBA, in the NFL, MLB, whatever you're looking for, it's hard. A lot of luck, opportunity, right connection, right time, like a lot of that has to play into it. Like that's where I'm like, you get the experience, you get the skills, that gives yourself the opportunity, but you got to like enjoy that process, enjoy, because if you don't enjoy it, you're going to crash at the end. And then even like you get the internship and it doesn't live up to what you wanted it to be. And so even with my classes, that's one of the things is like, enjoy the work we're doing. Like, I love the NBA draft. A lot of people who are like NBA gurus love the NBA draft. So enjoy meeting people who can give you like behind the scenes of what's going on, and you can learn how to study draft picks and how NBA teams do that. And I always want it to be, whether you get the job in the NBA or not, to enjoy the journey. And then if you get a job in college or high school and you enjoy that, like awesome, like that's a win. The NBA doesn't always have to be the final destination.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm full disclosure, I was a minor in sports management, so I guess me and John, I have a lot of like empathy for the journey, and know a lot of obviously coaches and people that have been through the journey. I guess drawing a really large parallel into like what we do as far as mental fitness, mental health, and things of that nature are concerned within athletes. I see a really interesting parallel into the sports management side of things, John. Right, where it's a lot of them are former college athletes or high school athletes or people that are interested in sports in general that kind of get into these fields. And one of the things that you talked about is enjoying that process of the journey, right? I meet with a lot of athletes that want to get to the MLB or the NBA or be the best or get that college scholarship, right, into football or whatever sport that they play. And I think that's a lot of like the hustle that goes into it as well. But it's also the risk that you're taking, right? To say that, hey, there may not be a payoff at the end of that journey. And maybe it's a parallel to internships, right? That you've experienced, where individuals get into the internship, they think that, oh, this is going to be awesome, I'm interning with so-and-so, I got to like pay my dues. And then 6 months into it, maybe they're like losing some motivation. So I guess from your perspective, first, have you seen that firsthand? And then second of all, how do you coach people through that journey of their expectations and making sure that their mindset is aligned with this? Because a lot of people are saying, hey, we do this because we love this, not just to get paid, which is kind of counterintuitive a little bit to life, right? Again, I'm living in Los Angeles. People have a lot of stuff, you can get on the Instagrams and the social media, you start negative self-comparison. So I guess, how do you sustain motivation in a career field like this?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think, two things kind of stand out to me in what you just talked about. But as far as the journey, it's like one thing, it's not necessarily, whether you get the job you wanted or the internship you wanted, but it's who you become. Like, that's what really matters, is like, your character, and, your persistence and your courage. And, if you're attacking whatever you want to attack in life and giving it your all, that's all you can ask for. Just like a team that wins or loses, like the final score, obviously you want to win the game, but if you give everything you have, you've won in that sense. And the other thing is relationships. I think that's the thing. If you ask most people in professional sports what they love the most about their job, it's probably going to be relationships. Or the thing they least like about their job is going to be relationships, because that plays such a key role in your journey. And, one of the things I learned in my time was, valuing, not valuing who you're becoming, because that's going to play into every facet of your life. And then, valuing those relationships you make along the way. Obviously, in any industry, you'll see people just, climb a ladder to the top. The top is pretty lonely and pretty empty. But if you're carrying people with you and you got people together, like, that's a lot of fun. And I can speak, my time with the Trailblazers, like, our goal was to win a championship. We never did. We made the Western Finals once, but like Terry Stotts, Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, like, we had a blast. Like, we had a great staff, a great group of guys. And, our goal was to win a championship for, 5-6 years that we felt like we had an opportunity. Obviously, most pundits didn't think we did, and we didn't achieve maybe, the bar of success we would have wanted to, but we put ourselves in the mix and we had a blast doing it. And I think that's all you can ask for. And then you carry those relationships all along the way. And so now, obviously the Bucks are struggling in the playoffs right now, but, I still, got Damian's back, CJ, like everyone's still connected from those seasons of life we had together. And even like people ask me, like, who's your favorite team now? Like I grew up Indiana Pacers and then worked for the Blazers, but my favorite teams it's the guys I work with, whoever they play for now and whoever they coach for and scout for. So, everyone kind of the relationships become more important than anything on the journey.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I think a lot of, we have this term in psychology called egocentrism, right? Where it's like, it's only me and it's about me, right? The ego is this, me, I self, I see myself in the mirror. I'm doing all these things for me, for my career, for money, for status, for whatever it is to like achieve my goal. But what I love about what you just said is it's not about you, right? Like some of the most genuine moments I feel from what you just described was it's about the team, it's about the camaraderie, it's about the journey, it's about the doubters, right? And proving them wrong and being a part or a piece of the puzzle in order to make this whole thing function and for all of us to reach our combined goals, which ultimately is a championship, right? Whether that's the front office, I don't need to go on like into that analogy. I think we all know what I'm talking about there. But when it came to working with Dame, with individuals kind of in the Trailblazers, what was the leadership like? Like, what were the individuals saying? I'm sure that there were egos that you had to deal with. I'm sure that there were. How did y'all gel as a front office team, and how did you feel that translate also onto the court, which kind of seems a little funny, and obviously there are, some sports organizations that are a little bit divided when it comes to their front office staff and translating that thing as a court, but like, how did individuals gel or unify surrounding a cause and go forward?
Yeah, I'll hit that from a couple different aspects, but like you mentioned, egos. One, people might say like, oh, people shouldn't have it. Everybody's got an ego, and so it's about managing that. Your top players, every player on your roster is probably going to have an ego, and you kind of want them to. You want your best players to think they're the best. Dame will come out in the preseason and go, I think I should be in MVP conversation. We want him to say that. We want him to go chase that. Your coaching staff, they're going to have egos. Your front office, they're going to have egos. So for someone like me who's on the staff, I need to not have an ego. I need to be humble. And when we hire people, that's one of the things we would talk about is like, there's no room for your ego. Like the players got egos, the GM got an ego, the coach got an ego. There's no more room for your opinion. It was kind of one of the things we were coached with when like I started as an intern is like you don't talk for a year, 2 years until they ask you to, until they want your opinion. So you just go in, you grind, you work. And so that's one of the things, we carried on through our internships of, we don't need your ego. We don't need your opinion. We just need you to work. And once you've proven that, then you kind of, you get a chance to prove yourself. Kind of the other angle within the team aspect, Damian Lillard's one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around in my life and was able to pick up on that from his rookie year. So we were kind of in a transition at that time. We had the, LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy, Greg Oden team. Obviously, Greg and Brandon had injuries. LaMarcus was still there. Damian comes in and kind of immediately, and it wasn't just on the court, it was off the court. He started, he would host events or rent out a theater, and he would be like, hey, John, make sure, all the ball boys, team attendants get invited. And some of the ticket people will come up. He included the whole organization and everything. And then all of a sudden, as a staff, you buy into that, and everyone wants to see his success. He would call out veterans for, things they would say or how they would treat a teammate, and just held everyone accountable in the organization. And so pretty soon everyone's following a guy like that. And then when he backs it up on the court, it's really easy. And then, CJ was just like him, just a high character guy. So, I think that's why the Blazers had so much success for that period of time, is just everyone fell in line behind that leadership.
That's awesome. I mean, I've heard stories about Dame, but to hear it firsthand, I think is amazing. And the inclusivity, right, of other individuals. But I heard a couple of things of what you said. Like, leadership is also the behavior, like what you say, how you say it, and some of the behaviors that are also portrayed. And secondly, one of the things I heard also in there is inclusion, and thirdly is accountability, right? Like having the individuals that are leaders in the team, or even if they are veterans, to not necessarily, I guess, fall in line, so to speak, but to buy in, right, to the cause, to what we're doing, to listen, right? And obviously, what you said rings true, right? Have an ego, but balance that ego out with this like unification of the message that's kind of coming forward, and that's highly important for an individual to have. So, and inclusion, right? The front office staff just saying like, hey, everybody's included. I want everybody here. I want everybody to hear our message, the things that people are saying. And so that leads me to this question. I usually like start off with this, but I would love for you to address like, what are the 3 mental skills that you think that are most important that you see in the athletes that you've worked with, right? Obviously the greats like Damian Lillard, et cetera, that were there with that Trailblazers team. What are the 3 that you think?
I'd say one is persistence of just the everyday. No matter what, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my work. One of the things that frustrates me per se is when like, you know, a guy will go 1 for 11 and then he takes some shots after the game, like the gym's empty and it's like, look at this guy back in the gym. Like that stuff really isn't that impressive. It's like, what's the guy doing every single day? You know, I'll say there's one guy on our team who every year it seemed like he got beat out by a second rounder for a position he thought he should be in. And then he would go to the media, he would talk a big game of, you know, what am I doing? And then, you know, that first week of practice, he's there an extra hour after practice and everyone's snapping shots. And it's like, that doesn't matter. It's like, what are you doing in November, December, every day? And that's where I can say, you know, guys like Dame, CJ, Wesley Matthews, LaMarcus, and Nick Batum, like those guys, it's like they don't just become stars on accident. Like they put in the work every single day. And so just that persistence, I think another thing is the focus of knowing like, here's my end goal, and not just, you know, that's where I guess you gotta have the ego or selfishness of what's my end goal as an athlete. What do I need to improve in and being focused on that. And so, you know, being persistent and then focusing in on that. And then I think the other thing that I think goes along any staff member, player, coach, is I'd say, I don't know how this fits under mental skills you could explain, but like kind of vulnerability and community, where as a staff member, there's, you know, working 7 days a week for like 9 months straight. Like I can't do that without a team around me as a video coordinator, people to support me in basketball and out of basketball. And I think for a player, not only do they need that support system, but like they need a coaching staff as well to help them grow as an athlete. But then we all have to have each other to help us like even mentally to stay fit. Because I remember times as a video coordinator where I would kind of like lock myself in the video room and kind of have a mental breakdown and throw some things against a wall and get through to the other side, which I don't think is always the healthiest side, but once, you know, by having a support system and community to fall back on is highly important.
Wow. I mean, dude, so much to unpack there. So some of the things that you talked about were vulnerability, right? I'll just go backwards in order. Vulnerability. And I think that that's extreme, right? If you're working 7 days a week, like you said, what are some of the coping mechanisms that I have in place? What are some of the boundaries? What is my support system, right? My friends, my family, and the staff that are there. Because I think that within our work culture, we don't really see people that we work with as family. As a matter of fact, a lot of individuals are against that, right? Like we're not friends, we're coworkers, right? But within sport, I think it's a lot different, right? Where those individuals, you spend so much time with them, there's so much team camaraderie. It's kind of akin to the military in a certain extent, which I used to work with those members. And the other two things, persistence and focus, that just screams like long game to me. And back to what you said about individuals kind of talking in the post-game press conference saying, or after a game where, I mean, D'Angelo Russell, what was it, just like a couple days ago, didn't hit a single shot. Last night he played pretty well. And you kind of look at that and maybe they're taking shots up after the game. And what you're saying is, dude, throw that out the window. Right? It's kind of too little too late. Like, what are you consistently doing on a regular basis to bring your performance to a high level? And is that just for show, right? People are snapping pics, whatever it is, and you could attribute that to whatever. Like, we could speculate as, you know, media personnel or people from the outside. I don't know what's in that person's mind if they're saying, oh, I'm doing this for me or I'm doing this for the media. So that's neither here nor there. But I think that one of the things that you said that's a pretty hot take for me. Because I think a lot of people that are not inside the organization or not inside sports, they see that as, oh, this dude's grinding, or he has a chip on his shoulder, or, oh, yeah, he's doing these things. So I dig into that a little bit too, because I like that. Because seeing that from the outside perspective, you're saying this dude's gritty, he's resilient, right? He'd rather take up, 20 shots after a poor game than go to the locker room and shower. So I guess dig into that a little bit. You're saying that that's maybe a facade.
Yeah, I think it means nothing. I don't think it's a positive or a negative. So I'm not saying it's bad if a guy stays and shoots 20 shots. Maybe he needs to. But it really has no relevance on who that player is becoming in the long game. If he needs to shoot, 100 shots after the game, he should do it after every game or before every game or at practice. And so it's, what are you doing consistently on a day-by-day basis? And, the things that the media sees, those are the things that get blown up. I'll use an example. Wesley Matthews, probably one of my favorite players to work with the Blazers. But every single practice, for an hour before practice, him, Hersey Hawkins, and myself would go out, and Wesley would work on his post game. Every practice, before practice, for 30 minutes. His quarter three shot, every practice before, and he did the same. He was an undrafted guy who is still in the NBA. Like, he just had an incredible career for an undrafted player, but he was a self-made player because he was consistent every single day. And so that's what matters. But like, the media never sees what a guy's doing consistently an hour before practice. They see what a guy posts on their Instagram, and they'll catch like the last 10 minutes of practice, because that's usually when the media comes in, and then what happens after that. Now, some guys are going to stay every day after practice and shoot. Another player, Will Barton, he was a second-round pick who came in with us, had a really nasty-looking jump shot, and he stayed after practice till every single coach would leave. It was just the video coordinators out there rebounding because the coaches got tired because he didn't make any shots. But he worked on it so much that he carved himself out a really nice career and started making those shots because he worked on it every single day. And so those are the things that, to me, it's about the consistency and the routine rather than the spotlights that get caught by the media.
Yeah, I love your breakdown of that, because, I mean, that's some of the things that we talk to athletes all the time as a sports psychologist, is to say, like, it's what you do every single day, right? That sort of dedication. It's not a matter whether you lost the game, whether you won the game, no matter what's going on, whatever outcome is going on, it's, am I showing up consistently? Right? If it's 100 shots that I'm putting up, it's 100 shots that I'm putting up. If I put up more, that's fine. But it's consistently what I'm doing, not reactivity, right? Because individuals are kind of reacting to the outcome, saying, oh, I went 0 for 12. Now I need to put in more work. It's like, no, that work is putting it in or being put in regardless of the outcome, right? And I love that story. On piggybacking off of that, because I love the Wesley Matthews story, what was your interactions like with him, especially as a video coordinator? What athletes would diagnose the videos? What athletes would like really critique their form, their kinesthetics, all of this stuff? Were there any stories that stuck out to you about individuals that just put in the extra work to watch the videos? Yeah,
I would say a unique story is I was actually the first ever video coordinator to bring a live iPad out onto the court in the NBA, like when it first became a thing, and it was for LaMarcus Aldridge. LaMarcus wanted to see where every double team was coming from, whether they were coming from the baseline or the high post or whatever. And so it was kind of the first time in the NBA where a player could literally watch film and make in-game adjustments. And so if he saw, like, he was kind of known for, his mid-range J, and he would know where to spin and where to turn and where to spot up and which direction a double was coming from. So, maybe he, passes to the guy on the baseline or up top. And so we could kind of in real time, him and Caleb Canales had a really close relationship. And so Caleb was the head video coordinator when I was an intern. So we, that's where kind of the symbiotic relationships through the tree. But Caleb, Tim Grass, myself were the video staff. Caleb became an assistant coach. He worked one-on-one with LaMarcus. So, Tim Grass would be breaking down the game while it's going on. He would cut up some clips. We would get LaMarcus's post-ups first quarter on an iPad. I would run it out onto the court to Caleb Canales, and then when LaMarcus took his rest, he would come over, go through all of his post-ups, and then go back on the court and know how to adjust. So, he was a player, and then, we already talked about Wesley, Damian. Those were guys who just really dove into game film.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, like, it's the wanting to get better. One of the questions that I have for you is, like, have there ever been NBA athletes that you've worked with that actually didn't want to watch film, right? And I guess, how did you navigate that? Or is it always because I guess from an outsider's perspective or other individuals that are kind of like watching the NBA, we kind of think that like these are professionals, these are individuals that are going to seek you out, right? And work 10, 12-hour days, or, go back to the hotel, watch videos, or like, have you put together a clip of their, I don't know, left side jumper at the top of the key or whatever it is, and then just repeatedly go over and over and over. Were there any individuals, like athletes that you worked with, where you had to like kind of talk them into the importance of, watching film, or was it always just like they got it, they bought in, and some did it, I guess, just more than others?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it goes both ways. I think a lot of it stems from the leaders on your team, the coaching staff. One, I'll say, like when I was at the Blazers, almost every year I was there, we had an incredible coaching staff. And not only were they great with X's and O's, like our players liked them. So like I said, Caleb, Jay Triano, Nate Tibbetts, Dave Vanderpool, just Dale Osborne, Jim Moran, just so many guys that our guys liked spending time with them, which made a huge difference on whether they want to sit and watch film with you. If you can't connect with them, if they don't like you, they probably aren't going to watch film with you. Just a handful of guys probably go home and like study game film at night. There are some that do. The guys I mentioned, they did. They always wanted the full game after the game, and they go home and rewatch the whole game. But a lot of guys don't, and that's where your coaching staff is going to have to be key in building the relationships with the players to like sit down and actually go through things. NBA offenses, it's funny, like you'll hear people say like, oh, it's just like one-on-one ISO. There's NBA offense is so complicated. So much of it is read and react. So like, let's say a team has, 50 plays. There's going to be 50 different options for each play based on how the defense lines up and reading and reacting. And if this happens, then you go this way. And so that's where like point guards are brilliant to me. But then every player on the court has to know how to read and react to every movement. However the team defends a pick and roll, switches the whole offense, switches the whole defense. And so a lot of that comes from film work and understand. Like I'll just say, as a video coordinator, when I stepped in the league, I was so lost. I'm thankful to Caleb, Tim, and the Trailblazers for letting me grow just as someone trying to learn how an offense in the NBA runs. Because I was like, you watch basketball, you think you know basketball, and then you see what's really going on, and it's so detailed. And so I think, film's just such a huge part of understanding that. And I've seen a lot of, lottery picks, high-level players who come into the league, and they don't invest in, like, the day-to-day work and the game film, and they're out of the league pretty quickly because a lot of it is a mental game.
Yeah. And again, to your point, a lot of it is a mental game. Also, from a fan's perspective, I mean, you see LeBron get the ball in the post, go ISO. I mean, KD ISO all the time. But what you're saying is there's like 50 or more plays that they have, and it's way more robust than we're actually seeing from a fan's perspective.
Yeah.
And, there's plays being run all the time. And obviously the point guard's the orchestrator of that, maybe like the quarterback, if you will, when plays are called. Within that, I guess, what were some things that you saw from an individual to acquire the skills necessary to do that? Because I'm thinking of like a memory or like a knowledge acquisition standpoint. Like, were there players that just got it? They were able to pick it up fast, like all 50 plays. And then were there players that just didn't? They had to work a little bit extra to.
Definitely. I think, and a lot of it, that's where you see veterans can be traded or signed in the offseason. They just seamlessly fit in the team because a lot of NBA teams, they're running the same stuff, just different terminology. And so veterans can usually just hop team to team and fit in and know what's going on. They've seen it. Young fellas, a lot of times, that's why you'll see players get drafted high and it takes them a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's not necessarily their talent or skill level. It's understanding the mental side of the game and understanding how to read and react and how to play off of other superstars and all those things. And that's where it takes the time and investment so typically, we get rookies after practice, they're going to stay an extra half hour, and assistant coach and the video coordinators and a couple, the 14th and 15th man and the young guys are all going to be on the court running through all the plays over and over and over. And then they're going to get those on their iPads to take home to rewatch. And so that's where it's up to them then to take that investment to really learn everything, because, coaches prefer, playing players who know spacing and know where to be on the court. And that's where a lot of times, front office and coaching staffs will differ, where front offices want to see their young guys playing. Like, they drafted them, their name's on the line, their name is attached to this draft pick. And a coach is like, I want to play this veteran because I know what he's going to do. And so that's where a lot of times the young fellas, they gotta take the initiative of proving to the coach that they know what they're going to do when they're out on the court and that they're going to be consistent, because coaches are more so looking for that consistency rather than the variability.
Yeah, I love that. And as an athlete, you almost can't worry about like what the front office staff wants. You have to, think about, your coaches. I guess that leads me into the question of, I have a couple questions, man, like actually a lot of questions. So one of them is, how did, at least from your perspective, the Trailblazers deal with that, right? So like the coaches to the front office to the players, there may be some, as you mentioned, some discrepancies in saying like, hey, I picked this guy, he's not getting enough playing time, it's on me. But how do they, I guess, balance that relationship with the front office staff and the coaches? Because I guarantee there's probably some conflicts, right? And so when it comes to like conflict resolution, talking it out, having individuals, communicate in that way professionally. Have you experienced that? What's that like? What are some of the tips that you maybe have for people dealing with that?
Yeah, no, seen a lot. I worked for 5 different GMs and I'm trying to think, maybe 4 different head coaches. So I got to see a lot of different ways of doing things. One of the things that GM will do if they want to see one of their young guys play, and you'll see this across sports in general, but they trade the veteran. So they will eliminate options for the coach so that they have to play the young person. So that happens frequently in professional sports. And so, I'd say, and that's where you hear a lot of times of like, they'll hire a new GM, but the coach is still there. And people are like, oh, that coach is on a short leash. It's true, because a GM and a coach really does need to be on the same wavelength. And if they're not, usually the coach is going to get blamed first, and, the coach will get fired and the GM will hire his guy. But then the GM is attached to that person, so then they have to see them succeed. So usually it's a symbiotic relationship at that point where they both need each other to succeed, because the GM hired the coach and the coach, they need to help each other. But when they come in on different terms, it's really, you'll see a lot of that struggle of, if a coach won't play a guy, a GM might trade him. They'll have differing. So I've seen GMs who like, hey, the coach is the coach, I'm gonna let them do what they do. And then I've seen and I'd say especially when you look at like the last, I'll say in an NBA season, the last per se 20 games. It's kind of obvious in the NBA, like if a team's tanking, like the GM is likely, and coaches typically don't want to lose, but a GM will go in and be like, hey, this guy's not playing anymore. Or, we need to cut this guy's minutes, or we want to see what we have in the young guys. So they're playing a lot. So I'd say, GMs definitely get involved even more so at the end of a season.
Yeah. And just be on the same page. I guarantee that there's a lot of candid communication that kind of goes on. But like you also said, it's some things that are not said, right? Like trading of like that veteran, right? I mean, that's a behavior that happens within the NBA where, you know, it's kind of, it's communicated without being communicated in that way. And that can be pretty tough. Switching gears here a little bit back to the video stuff. You said that you were the first person to implement the iPad on the court. And I just want, from your perspective, just to talk around some of the innovations in technology that are kind of going on in the NBA, and I guess where you see it going in the future. Obviously, there's AR, VR, headset capabilities within that, and I think that those are super cool, especially for, I mean, we've seen some applications with Apple within golf in particular, but also from a quarterback's perspective. Tua Tagovailoa is like, comes to mind from the Miami Dolphins. It kind of has like the headset on while he's actually running plays. And so I guess from your standpoint, video coordination, where was it in the past? Obviously, you're the first person to have the iPad. And then also, like, where have you seen it now, and where is it going?
Yeah, no, I think probably my first few years, it just like exploded. So when I first started, so we're just not too long ago, like 15 years, it's not forever, but, we were doing DVDs. So all the teams were trading DVDs. We were cutting up film on DVDs. We were using a system called Exos, which was PC based. And this is crazy, though. The Boston Celtics, they still had an assistant coach that watched things from a VCR. So whenever we played the Celtics, we would have to, get a VCR out and record a tape to give to him. Like, we're talking 15 years ago. And so, we're in DVDs, but I feel like DVDs just lasted a few years, and then all of a sudden everything was in the cloud. And so basically, and, I think at that time we were trading things on, thumb drives and sticks and stuff. But then now it's just like, you just ship things from cloud to cloud to cloud. And so, and now, we were the first ones to be, have an iPad on the court, which, they allowed us to bring it on the court. Now it's like guys are just behind the bench coding live, and then the coach turns around like, hey, should we challenge that call? Because they're watching it live and rewinding. And so everything is just on the court. I'm sure, and just the advancement. When I first started, we didn't even have an analytics person. Ben Falk, he's cleaning the glass now, but he became our analytics intern. He was at the University of Maryland. We hired him as an intern, and I feel like soon enough he had like 20 loggers and people working for him. Like, analytics just blew up, and then not only analytics on the basketball side, now it's like on the sports science side, where the whole like training staff has their own analytics and their own system and sports science. And, we used to have like, Synergy, and now there's like 10 different options of Second Spectrum and Cerebro and Instat, and just all these options of things you can go with to break down film, to watch how many miles the guys run during a game, to all kinds of just stats, and analytics has just blown up in the sport.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy, right? Like, I've seen a lot of innovation on the technology side, and I used to be very, very much into it. And one of the things that we do with our athletes too is we coach them on heart rate variability, wearing the Whoop or like an Oura ring, tracking sleep. And you could track steps. I mean, I'm not an exercise physiologist, but I'm very much understanding of like why that would be highly important from an individual standpoint, to, I guess, just know them. But do you think that it's too much information? Right? Is there a standpoint to which maybe we could just have too much data? Obviously, for like coaching staff and maybe front office GM, like all these things, yeah, definitely consider that. And obviously, there's a movie made about it with like the Oakland A's. But yeah, is there a certain point to which you feel like maybe there's too much data and the athlete just kind of has to go out?
Yeah, no, I think so. There's so much data now, for better or worse. So like, obviously, resting guys has become a big thing in the NBA, and it's real. Like, you can go like, this guy has a 10% chance more of turning his ankle tonight, or a 0.5% chance of popping his Achilles. Like, you just know everything. And so it's like, okay, well, should we rest the guy, or we'll build in rest days? But then when you look over the course of like history in the NBA and everything, like, guys they're not getting more injured or less injured than they ever were, but you're so aware of it. And it's like, if you're aware of it, like, why wouldn't you rest a guy if you know there's a better chance? I don't like it. I wish every player would play every night if they're healthy enough to play. but I also understand from a management team perspective why you would hold guys out. But obviously that's become a big issue in the NBA because then you have these nationally televised games and contracts and players are resting, which just doesn't seem right for the sport. But if you say the only ultimate goal is to win a championship, well, why wouldn't you rest guys throughout the year? And so, it goes both ways. But that's one. I mean, you like having the information, but it can be too much. I'll just say on an individual player, one of the interesting things is, they can know everything about their body now. You can, have blood work done and just know everything. But do you want that team franchise to know everything about your body? They might find something in your blood or that goes like, oh, we don't want to give this guy a long-term $150 million contract. So that's where a lot of this comes into play with the legal ramifications, the ownerships, the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, all of that of what is a team allowed to know? Because a team could be like, no, we're trying to help you. But then the agent of that player be like, no, I don't want you to have that information. So there's a lot of things of, what's best for the athlete, but also physically, but also what's best for them financially and, protecting each other. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics with all the information that is now accessible to everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just because, again, you could poke and prod, and I mean, gut microbiome testing, testing of like blood panels and like all of this stuff, lactate levels, but it's just, is that biological information the athletes? And obviously it is, but do they disclose that information to other individuals, right? Because if you do, to the front office staff and et cetera, it can mess up the contracts and things that kind of take place. I want to switch gears a little bit because I could go down a rabbit hole in that conversation for sure. I want to talk a little bit about you in particular and I guess your journey and how you came to be in that position and where you're at now. So I guess tell me a little bit about the path and maybe even some hurdles that you had to overcome within your career. And then ultimately, why you kind of shifted gears in different directions and to be where you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up in the cornfields of Indiana. If anyone's seen the movie Hoosiers, that's basically my life growing up. Like we played against them in high school. Like we're from rural Indiana. And so loved basketball. My dream was to play in the NBA. Eventually you go, that's probably not going to happen. But I was like, I want to be a scout, a GM. And then, I went to college, went to Liberty University, started working as an admissions counselor and was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to work in the NBA. And that was, I minored in sports management. I tried to do the things, but I was like, I had no idea how do I get like a job in the NBA, specifically with the front office. And so I Googled NBA jobs. I think I mentioned that. But Googled NBA jobs and, I found an online course. I learned how to break down game film. And that's kind of where I say, like, you got to have a skill. Like I couldn't apply with all these teams and go like, oh, it's my dream to work for you. It's like, I needed a skill, something to put on my resume. It goes, I can do this for you. Like you need to like have something to do for a team. And so, I got skill. I started working with the basketball team there. So then I had some experience, just volunteering with them. And then I guess as far as the hardships process, I think I got rejected or didn't hear back from like 18 teams before I heard from someone. And so just that, even the persistence side of, trying to get a job internship in the NBA. And I'll talk to people now who, they got rejected 100 times. Like I feel like 18 is not even much anymore. But for me, that was a lot. But, for me, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to give up my dream. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the G League. I'm going to go work in the WNBA. And just like, luckily, kind of last minute, unpaid internship as a video coordinator with the Blazers opened up. So I lived in Virginia at the time, and I got offered an unpaid internship in Portland, and I packed up my car the next day and drove across the country. And I knew one person in Portland, and they let me stay on their couch. And I basically stayed there for a year as an unpaid internship. And that's part of like, when I say enjoy the journey, like, man, it's pretty cool to like reflect on like, wow, I just got up one day and packed up my car the next day and drove across the country and slept on a couch for a year. because this was my dream. And, you know, I can look back and like think that was pretty cool. I don't think I could do that now. But and then my second year, you know, they hired me as a paid intern, so I think I was making $9 an hour. And then my third year, I think my starting salary was $20,000. So that's where, yeah, you don't. People see lots of money in sports. It's like it kind of goes to the top. People working their way in. It's more about the enjoyment and love of the game because everyone's pretty replaceable. But yeah, I got to work with some really great people there early in my career and went through a lot of regime changes. And I have, you know, it's funny because I always tell people but when I got there, you know, Caleb Canales was the head video coordinator, Tim Grass, and they always told me like, we're all going to be fired and you're going to still be here. And I was like, no way. I don't even know what I'm doing. And, you know, we had Nate McMillan and Kevin Pritchard and all these like basketball people. And within 5 years, everyone was gone and I was still there. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is right. This is how professional sports worked. And I would always tell, you know, my interns, I'm like, you know, in 5 years, we're all going to be gone and you're going to be here. And it happened. It's just, that's the pattern. All of a sudden we're gone and whoever was interning, they're still there. And so, you know, I went through that pattern. I'd say, you know, as far as a journey and then like I had, you know, we had an incredible time. I got to work with you know, just a lot of great people, a lot of great opportunities, but things got really challenging my last 2 years and even like kind of diving into the mental side. But, you know, COVID hit, we were working from home. There was a lot of isolation, a lot of lack of communication from lots of levels. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people started having some really strong mental challenges. One of our video coordinators took his own life, which, you know, obviously was a huge thing for all of us. And then, you know, organizationally, we were told basically, hey, so-and-so took their life. Don't talk to the media. Here's a phone number if you need help. And then I got a call and said, go get his computer and get the work off of it. And I was like, what? I was like, you need to call people and make sure they're okay. Because I knew I was in a rough spot at that time, and I knew some others that were. And I think that was kind of my breaking point of enjoying working in the NBA, where I was like, we get that we're all replaceable as wins and losses, but when like a human life was so replaceable, that was really, really hard for me and for a lot of people. And that's kind of when I lost the joy of it, the love of it. And, you know, I guess I still worked in the NBA for a couple more years before my time was over, but my heart was gone once I, you know, saw a friend just leave. And just the reaction of the organization was not a positive one and that's where there's a lot of challenging dynamics. I don't think the people involved were bad people or anything, but I think a lot of people got caught up in the professional sports of we got to keep going, we got to move, we got to, you know, save our jobs and go to the next game. And it's like, like someone just took their life. Like, let's make sure people are okay. And that's not what happened in our situation. And so it's probably one of the biggest challenges I faced. And so for me mentally, that sent me down a pretty dark spiral, and it was during COVID. So a lot of people were isolated. And so it was a big challenge for a lot of people in our organization. And, so from there, things just spiraled down and until it ended. So my time was up. So I had a by and large good career and good time there, but things definitely didn't end on a positive note, I should say.
Definitely not. And thank you what a trying time, right? For you to, I guess, see the reaction of the individuals that you've worked so hard for, right? I mean, you moved out there on a whim. You had so much intrinsic motivation, love, passion. And then for something like that to happen to an individual that you worked with, that's entirely tragic. And then obviously the reaction of the organization was also not empathetic, if you will. And again, to your point, they're not all bad people. I think it's just from what you're saying to me, getting caught up in the professional domain of the NBA or any other organization, right? I mean, whether you're working at JP Morgan Chase or Google, right? There's always this like thought process or mentality of, hey, that sucks, and we're empathetic. However, tomorrow's tomorrow, and we must move on. And I think that that is highly tragic, and it's something in which, you know, we as people need to think more about, especially as leaders, right? Like, how are you going to lead through that? Man, that's such a tough situation.
Yeah, no, it definitely was like, and I think that's where, yeah, there was a lot of separation between, you know, organizationally as far as our management and our staff, and the staff, we really had to like look after each other, because we kind of, like I said, you kind of knew like, wow, I'm not valued as a human being. Like, my life can be gone and they're going to go get his computer. That was like somewhat shocking to me. And so, yeah. And like you said, I don't necessarily hold it against, you know, the people who are in management. I don't think it's necessarily a Trailblazer issue or an NBA issue. I think that's a life. And like you said, business, like, people treat things as very replaceable and on to the next. And there's just a lack of mental health and wellness, and just, you know, when things happen, of just like slowing down and taking a step back and making sure like people are okay. Because ultimately that's what should be most important, is people.
Yeah. And that leads me into a question, right? Like, from your perspective, especially going through COVID and some of the things that you dealt with within that story, as an organization, and even as a league, right, as the NBA or NFL or what have you, what do you think that we could do more of when it comes to supporting staff, supporting players, when it comes to some of the mental health challenges, and truly being there? Obviously, COVID was kind of this, I don't know, asterisk on, you know, 2020, and it is a special event, but not using that as an excuse. What do you think organizations, teams can do more of to support their staff, their players, from like a mental health standpoint?
Yeah, and I would say one thing, I think the NBA is taking steps in that direction. You know, guys who come to mind, Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, who've come out with their own mental health struggles, like that's reverberated across the league. Like, it wasn't, because I'd even say as a staff member, it wasn't looked on like, if I was in therapy, which I am, I go to counseling, but it's like, that would be looked as like, what are they doing? But now it's becoming more commonplace. And I think it's just, and now teams, I think even like the Trailblazers have like a team psychiatrist now, like someone with the team who they can go to. And like steps like that are really huge and needed, not just for players, but for coaches, for front office, for staff. Like, everybody's in it. It's every day. It's not healthy to work every day for 9 straight months, but that's the business. And so how can you make that, you know, a viable, healthy space? And I think a lot of that, you have to have resources around for people to deal with their own mental health struggles in that space. So I do think steps are being taken in the NBA in that regards. And so hopefully they'll continue to move forward in those spaces.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that there are a lot of steps being taken within the athletes, right? Coming forward, Kevin Love, as mentioned, DeMar DeRozan, individuals are starting to push forward this narrative that physical health is just as important as mental health, if not more important, right? And again, I don't want to like equate the two, but the same way that we take care of our bodies, we should also take care of our mind. One of the questions that I had for you was the culture of NBA front office and also staff, right? You drove across the country to be an unpaid intern. First, maybe let's talk about that. Like, where were you at from a mental standpoint? How did you make that? Because there are points in our lives, and the individuals that are going to listen to this podcast are also going to hear me say this, probably also hear you say this, to where we are fully committed to what we're doing. So much so that no matter what happens, no matter what stands in our way, we want to do that and pursue that. And I think that that's fairly healthy from a mental standpoint, for sure. But I guess, were there times in which you questioned your path? And I guess, how did you keep moving in that right direction, so to speak? Because again, couch surfing, making zero money. And again, we're in this day and age where I don't know if you had Instagram back then, but even if you didn't, there is like this negative self-comparison that you can have with other individuals, right? versus saying, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. Yeah, how did you keep going, man? Because when I hear about people driving across the country for a full year and then making $9 an hour the second year, and then the third year making 20 grand a year, it's just like, how did you keep it going? Were there doubts in your mind? And tell me about the thought process of resilience that you went through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I kind of going into it, I knew I want to work in the NBA. I will do anything to get there. I was incredibly focused, resilient, everything. And, I got my opportunity, and obviously I jumped on it. In hindsight, I look back and I go, oh my goodness, I should have even my roommate, I just left. I didn't even get rid of, I should have taken a week to clear out the stuff and everything. I'm just I look back on my younger self and I'm I literally got in my car the next day, packed everything I could and drove across the country because my dream has arrived and I'm going to be there. Luckily, like I said, I had good people who helped take care of me along the way. But, I got to the Trailblazers facility. I walked in. I was so excited. I'm trying to think. First person I met was Darius Miles. So that was cool. Greg Odom, we grew up right next to each other in Indiana. And so it was just really cool to be a part of the organization, and people were so nice. Within 2 weeks, I wanted to quit. I was, basically they put me in a room and said, go through 100 BCRs and see which ones work or not. Now, hindsight, they told me later, basically they wanted to test me and see how I responded. But I was basically just in a room doing this stuff. Portland, Oregon, rains every single day. I moved there in October, so it rains from October to May. The weather was miserable. I was pretty lonely as a person. I'm someone who's community's big, church, those kind of things. I was just by myself. And the team would travel and I would just be at the office by myself, going through tapes. So yeah, I didn't enjoy it. I got there. I felt okay, I achieved my dream and I'm done. I would have quit after 2 weeks. I was that hated it that much, except for for me, I'm a person of faith, and I just felt there's no way I could have gotten this opportunity without God being involved. So I'm going to fulfill my year of an internship, and then I was going to go to grad school in Orlando. That was my plan. Let me get out of here. And so that was kind of my plan for the whole year, just to get through the year. I was not enjoying it at all. And then it was towards the end of that year where some things really fell into place personally. For me, it was connection. Like I mentioned Caleb Canales a handful of times. He was huge at just being a resource and a person that I could lean on and have community with. I found a church community. I made some friends outside of the organization, which is something that's been huge in my life. Of a lot of people get so connected to the team that they don't build a life outside of it. And that was a hard lesson for me too. Once my time with the Blazers were over, I thought, people I'd worked with for 15 years, oh, we're still going to be buddies. Most of them I'm not. I haven't seen a lot of those people since. It's they're still there and you're not, and it's over. And the people I've become closer with are the people who also got fired. Were kind of, but it made me realize, who did I not keep in touch with who got let go before me? But there was such a struggle there. Until I really built a community in Portland outside of the team. And so, once that happened, I would say in theory, things fell into place. I was loving Portland, the organization, my role and everything. And then the GM got fired, the head coach fired. Caleb, who was my mentor, went to work for the Dallas Mavericks. And all of a sudden I was alone again. All my people were gone. I still had a job, which was great. But then I had to adjust to a whole new thing. And so, and I'll just say, I guess in my own personal life during that time, my brother-in-law, he was 33 at the time. He passed away from cancer. And so that was just a huge, I had just went through this whole work shift. And now this guy who was one of the closest people in my life, he passed away. I was working in Zimbabwe at the time. I guess haven't dove into that here, but I'd spend my off seasons in Zimbabwe. One of the young fellas there who I was just super close with, he died of HIV at that time. And so it was just all this loss and transition all at once. And so, that kind of goes back to where I talk about like vulnerability and community. And like, I did have, a support and close family and some friends outside of basketball that really kind of helped, get me to the other side of all that. Because there's just this constant loss and transition. And so I feel like, honestly, a lot of that next 10 years of my career was a lot of loss and transition, until finally, that part of my career ended. And now the last few years, it's been, building something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear a lot in your story just surrounding just resilience, right? And just like staying the course and staying the path, and like that being pretty challenging for you to do, because I mean, those are tough days, right? And during those tough days, what kept you going, from what I hear, is community and vulnerability. Was that like a learned thing? Like, did you read a book and it dawned on you? I mean, you said that like faith played a role, which is really huge. Us at Hearts and Minds, we support or believe in God, Christianity, so to speak, and others, and just support people through that. And we think that through faith, obviously, we can get through a lot of challenging times. But I guess, when did it dawn on you that from like a mental health standpoint, how did you, one, take care of your mental health, and two, how did you find out that like community and vulnerability, because I think those are two different things somewhat. You have to be vulnerable to gain trust, and then build a community, right? It kind of runs a parallel. So yeah, like, one, how did you take care of your mental health during those 15 years, which seemed extremely challenging?
Yeah.
And then two, like, how did you build that community? How did you learn to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I'd say community has always played a big role in my life from the time I was young. Like I said, like I grew up in church and youth group and had a close family. And so I just always had friends and community. After I left, I went to an academy in Texas for a couple of years. That's probably where like the vulnerability piece, where just being on your own and with people, and they were big on community and just started to like be honest with yourself and your feelings and who you are. And like, I guess I won't say it came naturally, but I had no problem in being honest or saying what's happening in my life. And that's something I kind of took along each season of my life. I'd say when I came to Portland, I didn't have, I guess, maybe I was vulnerable, but I didn't have the community. So I could write a blog post and talk about my feelings and everything, and people in Indiana and Virginia could cheer me on, but I was alone. But, over time, I built a community in Portland, which is why I'm like, I haven't been with the Blazers for a few years, but I'm still in Portland because of that community outside of basketball. And I think that's one of the most important things I ever did here, was build a life outside of basketball. I know it's like kind of cool to say, like, when someone's being interviewed or whatever, like, hey, what's your passions outside of basketball? Nothing. I love basketball. But it's like, basketball is not going to carry you through life. Like, do you value community and outdoors and cooking? And a lot of times, like, we would ask people like that when we hire, like in the interview process, like, what do you like outside of basketball? And we gravitated towards the people who had hobbies outside of basketball because it made them interesting. And so, yeah, those things, became very valuable. That, there's people who, became my friends when I moved here to Portland that are still my friends 15 years later, that I still, hang out with regularly. And those are kind of the people who, like, whatever season I was going through, like, I've got those people who've got my back and I've got their back. And that's just such an important part of life.
Yeah. I love what you said there, because I think that's like really true surrounding the individuals that have more going on outside of sport. And I think that especially athletes that we know and talk to, their whole identity is wrapped up in sport. Like, Damian Lillard's not going to walk down the street and not be Damian Lillard, not get recognized for basketball and his basketball prowess. However, he himself doesn't, just using him as an example, doesn't need to hang his hat on solely being that, right? Because as individuals go on into retirement, they often struggle with that next phase of life. Like, what do I do next? Who am I? And they usually gravitate back towards basketball or what have you, just because that's their love, their passion, things that they know, which is fine. But I think that where we struggle, and where you might have, and I have definitely struggled, all of us do, is that transition from one thing to another, and having hobbies, additional friendships, relationships, things that are built outside of basketball are definitely going to be those things that carry us through. I guess like from a mental standpoint, talking with and being around some of the athletes that you knew, what would you say, and this is maybe the second to last question before we wrap up here, was the biggest differentiating factor in those athletes that made them great? Right. Again, the Dames, the people that you were kind of around, what were some things that stuck out to you just surrounding who they are, how they conducted themselves, and how they were great from a mental standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say two things come to mind, and they kind of weave into everything with community and work ethic. But one, the work ethic piece, like I've never seen an athlete work harder than Damian Lillard. And so people might go, oh, natural raw talent. It's like, no, that guy before practice, after practice, off season, like he put in the work to develop. He doesn't just shoot from the logo on accident. Like that is repetition every single day. But then like the community piece, when we had a lot of, 19, 20-year-olds joining our team, and I saw such a stark difference of who was successful and who wasn't based on who came with them to Portland. The ones whose families came out tended to be more successful, and the ones whose friends came out and their friends got jobs became successful. The ones who came out and their friends came out and their friends set up parties for them, disaster. Those guys didn't make it because after practice, they're going to party. And that's not how you're going to get your professional career set off on the right track. And honestly, it's going to lead to injuries, and you're not going to be taking care of your body and your well-being. But when people had a family structure, or they've had friends out who were also like, I'm not going to lean on you, I'm going to go get my own job and start my own life, but I'm here with you. I saw a lot of success in those people's careers. And so that's where just that community and that support system comes through so huge for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Just echoing, right. That hard work and dedication, those are teachable skills, right? If you can unlock some of the values and beliefs that you have and the intrinsic motivation to drive and go forth and really dedicate yourself to the craft in any job, right? Whether video coordinator or whether you're an athlete or whether you're myself or anybody that works for anywhere, those are some of the key parts, but it's also who you surround yourself with. And really glad that, John, that you kind of mentioned that. I think that that's huge, especially for the athletes that are listening to this podcast, to be able to understand that those individuals that you surround yourself with are going to make or break who you're going to be, right? From a character development standpoint, from a behavioral standpoint, those people that you surround yourself with influence you a lot into who you will become. And I really love that you said that. Last question before we wrap up here. This is kind of like our lightning round. I know that we've had, you've gone for an hour or so, and I want to respect your time. Just lightning round really quick. 3 questions. 1, what's your favorite food?
I'd have to go with Thai food. That's kind of my go-to. If I'm driving home, I got to go stop at the Thai restaurant and pick up some curry.
Oh, I love that. When you're frustrated, what do you do?
I would say if I'm in a healthy state, which hopefully I am, poetry. I love to write poetry, and so I usually process mentally where I'm at through poetry.
I love that. Man, it's been a while since I've done any poetry or read any poetry. My favorite poet's Robert Frost. I don't know if you know. Yeah, Robert Frost. That's awesome. Last one. What's an underestimated part of your routine, whether it be daily, monthly routine? What do you think is an underestimated part of it?
I'd say the underestimated part is the routine itself of having a routine that you're committed to and stick to. So for me, I'd say, I worked in the NBA and it was always just like crazy every day. And then when COVID hit, I was working from home, and that's when I really had to get a routine in order. And I was all over the place, and I started going to bar 3 every morning. So, and I still do that to this day. Even now I work in marketing and I do other things, but I still go to bar 3 first thing in the morning. And then I go to a coffee shop after, and I do either like my work or creative work from there, which used to be like I would go log game film and stuff when I was working during COVID. But having that routine changed everything for me. A lot of it is just that first thing in the morning. Having that or like Atomic Habits talks about, stacking habits, but like having that first thing that stacks to the next, to stack to the next. So it's just that routine itself and having that first thing that starts to stack.
I love that. Right. So that's funny. You kind of took this like meta point of view where the underestimated part of the routine is the routine itself. I love that. And also I think during COVID, a lot of people have kind of realized that these routines are pretty important, right, for us and for consistency of our mental state, our physical health. Also, like you mentioned that, you go to bar, and then also bar 3 is like those classes, right? Yeah. Those are awesome classes. Really challenging, by the way, if anybody's listening. It's like, I encourage a lot of athletes to do yoga, do bar, do Pilates, because I think you're just working yourself in a different way. Anyway, that's awesome, man. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. A lot of the like other things that we haven't even touched on, like Zimbabwe, Ukraine, I guarantee you that is probably part of your routine also during the off season that kept you from burning out as well, that I would love to touch on maybe in another time.
Yeah.
And also just thank you for talking about everything that you've been through in the NBA, your journey, your progression, the loss that you experienced, the challenges, right, during COVID, and also the incredible athletes that you've worked with. So closing out for today, John Ross, thank you so much. Tell the people on the podcast where they can find you.
Yeah. I guess on socials, I'm John Ross is such a common name that it's hard to find me on socials, but LinkedIn is where a lot of people follow me at. And then Get in the Game 101. So I have a Substack. You can go to my website, getinthegame101.com or getinthegame101.substack.com. You can find me there. And like I said, I'm happy to answer questions in basketball or life, wherever someone's at. So feel free to reach out to me. We'd also love to have anyone who's listening to hop in one of our courses. If you're interested in working in the NBA or just love basketball and want to learn more, we love having, getting to meet new people. And so, yeah, anything you're interested in, I'm happy to chat, follow up with anyone. And Dave, hopefully, we'll follow up with you sometime as well. And if you guys want to have me back on, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, 100%, man. Thank you for coming. Again, that is Get in the Game 101. I'll put a link in the description of this podcast as well. But for us, myself, John Ross, we are signing out. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Dave.